The morning of my wedding, the air was thick with the scent of chrysanthemums and anticipation. I stood in my childhood bedroom, the red cheapao hugging my form, a garment of exquisite silk that had cost my father a month's salary. Outside, the rhythmic beat of the village drums should have been heralding the approach of Leo's procession. But as the sun climbed higher, the drums fell silent, and the anticipation curdled into a cold, heavy dread. He wasn't coming. A strange, unsettling calm settled over me. It wasn't shock, nor the sharp sting of humiliation. It was a grim, certain recognition. He's been reborn too. In our past life I was Elena, the paragon of wifely virtue. I had polished my husband, Leo, until he shone, turning the rough, ambitious young man from a poor mountain village into one of the most influential figures in Harbor City. I tended to his ailing parents, managed his household with thrift and precision, and navigated the complex web of his social obligations with flawless grace. I sold a courtyard house, my own inheritance, to fund his sister Clara's study abroad, cementing his family's rise. And for all of it he hated me. His hatred had a name, Sophia Reed. She was his wistful poetry, his tragic muse. She had come to me, desperate, tears streaking her perfect face. She was pregnant, and the father, a married literature professor she'd been involved with, had abandoned her. She needed money, she said, to take care of it. She begged me to let her use Leo's name, just this once, to save her reputation. I, fool that I was, saw a sister betrayed by love and agreed. I gave her the money and kept her secret. The back-alley procedure she chose left her scarred and barren. She vanished from our city, and in Leo's heart she solidified as the one great love I had destroyed. He woke from a drunken stupor I had carefully orchestrated to not happen, believing he had been with her, believing the child was his. My act of mercy became, in his eyes, an act of monstrous jealousy. So in this new life he had chosen to teach me a lesson. A public, searing humiliation on our wedding day. He would let me languish in disgrace for a few years, he thought, until I was properly chastened, and then he would magnanimously take me back. Lydia? Are you all right? My mother's voice was frayed with worry at the door. I'm fine, Mama, I heard myself say, my voice eerily steady. The silence from the groom's party was deafening. My father, a man of quiet strength, paced the courtyard like a caged tiger, his face a thundercloud. Relatives whispered in frantic clusters, their glances towards my door filled with pity and a morbid curiosity. After several agonizing hours, a cousin returned from the neighboring village, his face ashen. The confirmation was delivered in a hushed, furious tone. The Grant family had backed out. Leo was not coming. My father slammed his fist on the wooden table, making the teacups rattle. This is an outrage. A deliberate insult, he roared, his voice cracking with a pain I knew was for me. He immediately gathered my uncles and marched towards the Grant household to demand an explanation. They returned hours later, defeated and dusty. The Grant family's gates had been locked, their house silent as a tomb. The message was clear. The humiliation was complete. The stress of the day was too much for my parents. Both took to their beds that night, feverish and heartsick. As I sat by my mother's bedside, cooling her forehead with a damp cloth, a profound and unexpected joy bloomed in my chest. I had come back to this life just in time. Thank the heavens. Everything could still be changed. While my father was still mustering his strength for another confrontation, I slipped away alone. I took the bus into town, my red cheapao drawing curious stares, and went straight to the marriage registration office. The kind-faced woman behind the counter remembered me. Oh dear. Back so soon? Don't worry, I have your documents right here. Just bring the stamped certificate back when you have it and I'll process everything. In my past life I had been so flustered, so grateful for her kindness. Now I offered her a practiced, weary smile. Thank you, but there's been a change of plans. May I have the unstamped certificate back? She looked confused but handed the papers over. I took them, the flimsy sheets feeling like a pardon from a death sentence. As I turned to leave, I bowed slightly and genuine tears, not of sorrow but of liberation, streamed down my face. Thank you, I whispered again. On the bus ride home as we trundled through a quiet, tree-lined avenue, I saw them. Leo, his face radiant with a triumph I knew all too well, was holding Sophia Reed in a tight embrace. She was nestled against his chest, her face tilted up to his with a shy, glowing smile. Sophia, I heard his voice, muffled but fervent through the open window. This time I won't let you face anything alone. I will take full responsibility as the father. Then Sophia's eyes, flickering over the passing bus, met mine. A jolt of panic went through her. Her smile faltered and she quickly buried her face in Leo's shoulder. I turned my head away, my gaze cold and indifferent. I no longer cared for the man from my past life. Let him have his lie. He always believed that lost baby was his. Only Sophia and I knew the truth. It wasn't. And the tangled web of their new beginning was no longer my concern. My father was consumed by guilt. He had chosen Leo for me from 2 suitors, insisting the young man was no ordinary talent, destined for greatness. He wasn't wrong. Leo's achievements in our past life were known far and wide. But no matter how high he soared, I no longer wanted a place in his shadow. I had thought it over carefully. In this world, a woman was still expected to marry. If I had to marry, I would choose the most solid, dependable man I knew. The one whose silent, steadfast love had outlasted even death in another lifetime. When I found my father alone in his study, staring blankly at a scroll, I spoke softly. "Father." He looked up, his eyes weary. "Lydia. My child, we will find you someone better. You don't have to settle for the remnants of this disgrace." "I'm not settling," I said, my voice firm. "I have made my choice. I want to marry Marcus Thorne. Ask him if he is willing." My father was stunned into silence. Marcus Thorne was the other suitor, the one he had passed over for Leo's dazzling potential. A soldier, solid and reliable as granite, but without Leo's cunning ambition. "Lydia, are you sure? He is a good man, but—" "I am sure, father. It's him." A memory surfaced, unbidden. From my past life, on this very day, a tall, powerfully built man with skin darkened by the sun had appeared at the edge of our village. He had stood there, drenched in sweat as if he had run a long way, his eyes fixed on me in my red wedding dress. Then, as our eyes met, he had turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped in a sorrow so profound I had felt it across the distance. 4 years after, I received anonymous packages. Money, rare spices, bolts of fine cloth, always from the remote bases where Marcus was stationed. It had stopped after a decade. I'd assumed he had moved on, found a family of his own. It wasn't until decades later, visiting a martyr's cemetery, that I found his headstone. He had died in the line of duty. And next to his name, etched in small, simple characters, were the words, "To my eternal love, Lydia." Someone had tossed me aside like a piece of broken pottery. Someone else had loved me with his entire life. Now, in this new chance, I would not let him walk away. My father, though skeptical, respected my decision. The shame of Leo's abandonment was a stain on our family, and my swift, decisive choice was a balm. He sent a messenger to the Thorne family who lived in a neighboring county. The response came not with a letter but with the man himself. Marcus Thorne appeared at our compound gate the very next morning, still in his military fatigues, his hair damp as if he had rushed here straight from duty. He stood stiffly, his cap in his hands, his whole body radiating a tense, almost fearful energy. My father ushered him into the main hall. I brought them tea, my hands steady, my gaze clear. When I handed Marcus his cup, our fingers brushed. A jolt like static electricity passed between us. His eyes, a deep, steady brown, met mine, and for a fleeting second, the tension in his face melted into something raw and hopeful. "Lydia," my father began, his voice formal. "Marcus has heard of our situation. He has come to pay his respects." Marcus cleared his throat, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "Sir, I came as soon as I heard." He turned his gaze to me, and it was like being anchored in a stormy sea. "Lydia, if you would have me, I am yours." There was no poetry, no grand declaration. Just a simple, unwavering statement of fact. It was more reassuring than any flowery promise Leo had ever uttered. "I would have you, Marcus Thorne," I replied, my voice equally steady. A grin, wide and unguarded, split his face. The transformation was breathtaking. The serious soldier vanished, replaced by a man whose joy was so pure it lit up the room. "Then consider it done," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. I almost laughed. "Well, Marcus, I suppose it's your misfortune. I need to get married and you're still single. Let's just make do with each other." But looking at his face, I knew it was no misfortune for him. He looked as if he had been handed the moon. To leave behind the whispers and the pitying glances, my parents decided we would move immediately to Harbor City, into a courtyard house that had been part of my mother's dowry. It was a beautiful, well-preserved property that had sat unused for years. In my past life, this was the house I had been pressured to sell for Claire's education and Leo's startup capital. A prime piece of real estate in a soon-to-boom city, lost for a fraction of its future worth. Now it would be my home. The wedding was a simple, heartfelt affair, a stark contrast to the lavish, aborted spectacle with Leo. It was held in the courtyard of our new home, decorated with red lanterns and fragrant blooms. Marcus's parents, humble and kind-faced farmers, had made the journey. They held my hands, their eyes wet with tears, and welcomed me into their family with a sincerity the Grants had never shown. We bowed to our parents, to heaven and earth, and to each other. As I rose from my bow, I saw the look in Marcus's eyes. Not triumph, not possession, but a profound, reverent gratitude. It stole my breath. Unexpectedly, just after the ceremony, one of Marcus's subordinates arrived, breathless. There was an urgent assignment. Marcus's face fell, a storm of regret and duty warring in his expression. "Go," I said softly before he could speak. "Your duty calls. I will be here." He looked at me, stunned by my easy acceptance. In my past life I would have been anxious, worried about appearances. Now I felt only a steady support for the man who defended our country. Before he left, he pressed a small, worn notebook into my hands. It was his savings passbook and a deed to a small plot of land he owned. "It's not much," he rasped, his brow furrowed. "But it's everything I have. It's yours." Seeing the tension in him, I did something impulsive. I rose on my toes and pressed a soft, quick kiss to his lips. "I'll be waiting for you to come home," I whispered. His strong hands wrapped around my waist, pulling me close for a brief, solid moment. "Okay," he rasped against my hair, the single word laden with more promise than 1,000 poems. I had already decided. I would give Marcus everything, my loyalty, my trust. I would be a better wife than I had been in my past life, more patient, more at peace. I had assumed from our few formal meetings in the previous lifetime that he was a quiet, reserved man who wanted a steady, graceful wife. I believed no one could play that part better than I could. What I did not expect was the man who returned from his mission a week later. The quiet, reserved soldier was gone. In his place was a man of startling passion, a possessiveness that was not harsh but fiercely devoted. He was clingy. He seemed to physically ache if he was not touching me, his hand always finding the small of my back, his fingers twining with mine. He looked at me with a heat that could melt steel. The first few days after his return, I barely left our bedroom. He was insatiable, his lovemaking as intense and focused as I imagined he was in combat. In a moment of overwhelmed frustration, I kicked him lightly, only for him to catch my ankle, rested on his shoulder, and respond with even more devastating intensity. Our parents had bought adjoining courtyards, and the two families merged into one loud, happy clan. My mother and his mother became fast friends, cooking together, knitting and gossiping. They never interfered, only watched over us with quiet contentment. But soon I noticed a change in our meals. Specific dishes began to appear with alarming frequency. Scrambled eggs with chives, spicy pork kidney stew, goji berry and chicken soup. My face burned crimson as I understood the implication. I kept my head down, my cheeks flaming hotter each day. Only Marcus, shameless, had the nerve to comment. "Mother," he said one evening, spooning the suspicious soup, "this is a bit salty today." "Father, this fish tastes muddy. Let it soak in clear water for a few days next time." And no matter what he requested, both of our fathers would nod earnestly, taking notes. Marcus caught my eye and grinned, a smug, triumphant look. "I'm riding your coattails, wife," he whispered later, pulling me onto his lap. "If I asked for the moon, I think Dad would find a way to pull it down from the sky so I could taste it." Our parents had long resigned themselves to the idea that I might never marry. Now they were overjoyed. I blushed and pinched his hard waist. Instead of flinching, he leaned in, tapping his cheek. "Sweetheart, how about a few more kisses here too? When I'm out on missions, I live off those memories. They're what keep me going, feeling close to you." While I stayed home waiting peacefully. And I did not wait in vain. Every month, without fail, a package and a letter would arrive. Not the anonymous parcels of my past life, but gifts sent with open devotion. Wildflowers, carefully pressed from a mountain ridge. A collection of iridescent seashells from a distant coast. Breathtaking photographs of landscapes he thought I would love. His letters were nothing like Leo's calculated, formal notes. They overflowed with a clumsy, heartfelt passion. My dearest Lydia, one read. I saw these flowers growing stubbornly from a crack in the cliff face. They are resilient and beautiful, but neither as resilient nor as beautiful as you. Not one is more radiant. Another sent with the seashells. Lydia, I whispered, I love you into this shell. Hold it to your ear. Do you hear my voice? The ocean sounds like my heart calling for you. My Lydia, a third said, accompanied by a photo of clouds swirling over a peak. Even the clouds in the sky form your silhouette. I miss you so much. I traced the words, my heart full. Marcus had brought a stability and order to my life I had never known. I didn't have to run around, my dowry dwindling, to cover a grasping family's expenses. I didn't have to worry about a sister-in-law's tuition or a mother-in-law's endless medicinal tonics. I didn't have to wake before dawn to serve others or stay up late catering to everyone's whims. I was free. And in that freedom I began to remember who I was and what I could become. The peace of my new life was a balm to my soul. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, my days were my own. I didn't wake to the sound of my mother-in-law's demands or the weight of a household's expectations. I woke to sunlight streaming into a room I shared with a man who looked at me as if I were the answer to a prayer he'd never dared to speak aloud. In the quiet afternoons while Marcus was at his unit, I began to explore the city. Harbor City was on the cusp of change, the air buzzing with a new energy. And I too felt a dormant part of myself stirring. In my past life I had possessed a gift for handiwork. My fingers could decipher the most complex embroidery patterns. My eyes could measure a fit with a single glance. It was a skill I had used not for myself, but as a tool for Leo's advancement. I remembered his boss's wife, a formidable woman named Madame Chin. She had adored the latest fashions from Hong Kong and Taiwan. Leo, seeing an opportunity, had pushed my recovering postpartum body to recreate intricate dress from a magazine she coveted. The fit had been perfect, the craftsmanship flawless. From that day Madame Chin became my most loyal secret client. For decades I tailored custom pieces for her, and in return she smoothed Leo's path, solving problems before they even reached his desk. When she retired he never visited her, not once. The last time I brought her a coat she had looked at me with sad, knowing eyes. Elena, she'd sighed, using my name from that life. You are too sincere for your own good. What will you do with a heart like that? Now, thinking of all Marcus was doing for me, his letters, his devotion, his unwavering support, I wanted to give back. I learned that his commanding officer's mother, a refined elderly lady named Mrs. Yao, had a particular fondness for traditional silk cheongsams from Suzhou and Hangzhou. Using the few chances I had to meet her at base events, I studied her posture, her bearing, the subtle way she moved. I stayed up night after night, my eyes straining in the lamplight, drafting patterns and working with the finest silk I could find. I was not doing this for advancement, but out of genuine affection for the woman who had raised such a fine son, and for the man I loved. When I finally presented the 2 finished cheongsams to her, my eyes were bloodshot from exhaustion. Mrs. Yao was speechless, her fingers trembling as she traced the delicate embroidery. But it was Marcus's reaction that undid me. His lips quivered and his eyes grew suspiciously bright. Lydia, he said, his voice thick. Sweetheart, I'll earn my own future. I married you so you could live well, not to work yourself to the bone. Trust me, I can do this. He took my hands, calloused from the needle, in his. My wife is talented and should be free to pursue what she loves. If you want to make this your hobby or even your career, I will support you with all my heart. But don't let it become a burden because of me. I looked at his vibrant, earnest face, so full of life, and all I could see was the stark, somber photograph engraved on the gravestone from my past life. The emotion swelled inside me, a tidal wave of love and grief and gratitude. I opened my mouth to speak, but instead of words, a wave of nausea rose, and I let out a series of dry heaves. I was pregnant. The news sent our little compound into a frenzy of joy. Marcus was completely stunned, then dizzy with elation. My in-laws rushed back to their ancestral home that very night to light incense and bow to their ancestors, thanking them for their blessing. That boy, my father-in-law kept saying, his voice choked, has finally proven useful. Before returning to his unit, Marcus bragged shamelessly to his father. Old man, if anyone should be bowing, it's to my wife. Without her, this family line would have ended with you. He didn't even finish the sentence before my mother-in-law chased him out the door with a feather duster, scolding him through her laughter. Marcus left, his grin wide and his step light. And far from neglecting me, my in-laws poured all their energy into my care. When they heard that free-range eggs from the countryside were more nutritious, my mother-in-law and my own mother traveled back to their village together just to buy them fresh. That evening, before they even stepped inside, I heard my father's booming voice from the courtyard, shaking with a rage I hadn't heard since the wedding day. "Goddamn that little bastard. I ought to kill him." I hurried to the door. My mother was trying to calm him, her face pale. She saw me and explained, her words tumbling out. While passing through Leo's village, they had run into his mother. The woman, who had hidden to humiliate us, now had the audacity to ask why I hadn't sent Leo his medicine money. She claimed he was out of pills. And his sister Clara, now in college, had the gall to ask why her monthly allowance from me had stopped. "Thank God you didn't marry into that family," my mother muttered bitterly. "Not a single good one among them. A bunch of shameless parasites." My mother-in-law, who had been carefully holding the basket of precious eggs, overheard everything. She didn't say a word, her face unreadable. Later, my mother pulled me aside, her voice low with worry. "Lydia, even though we were honest with them about what happened, no husband or parent likes to be reminded their daughter-in-law was left at the altar. It leaves a bitter taste. If your mother-in-law's tone is a little off lately, please just bear with it. Your dad and I can see clearly. Marcus is a good man. This will all pass soon." But that only made my father angrier. "Bear with it. Lydia didn't do anything wrong. Worst case, she gets a divorce. I'll take care of her and my grandchild myself." The atmosphere grew heavy. I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. Would my mother-in-law tell Marcus? If she did, would he think I had only married him out of desperation? Would this shadow from my past life finally tarnish the happiness I had found? With these thoughts churning, I drifted into a fitful, uneasy sleep. The next morning, my mother-in-law didn't cook or send any dishes over. The silence from their courtyard felt like a condemnation. I wasn't sure if I felt relief or a profound sadness. What struck me more was that my own parents weren't home either. Before I could sort through the wild thoughts in my mind, I heard loud, familiar voices outside the gate. "Fine, let's spare them this time. But if they talk nonsense again, I swear I'll break that brat's legs. Uncle will go with you. Marcus isn't home and he left his wife in our care. If we can't even handle something this small, what kind of sister does that make me? Lydia is such a wonderful person, and that vicious old hag dares to slander her. I'd die of rage if it were me." Then my mother-in-law's voice, sharp and clear. "Oh shoot. I forgot to cook for Lydia. What if she's starving? This is all your fault. I told you we should have come straight back after getting the eggs. Here, Auntie, not a single egg cracked. I held them tight the whole way." The gate swung open. My parents, my in-laws, and a few of Marcus's fiery cousins poured in, their faces flushed with righteous anger. My mother-in-law rushed to me, her eyes full of concern, not coldness. She explained everything in a rush. She hadn't taken the slander to heart. The only reason she hadn't argued back on the spot was because she was terrified of dropping the basket of eggs. It was winter and hens rarely laid. She had gone to multiple households to gather enough to nourish me and her grandchild. The moment she got home, she told my father-in-law everything. Together with relatives, they had gone straight to confront Leo's family and reported them to the police and the village chief. Leo's mother had finally admitted that her claim, that I had already been with her son, was a complete fabrication. My mother-in-law, a retired teacher, had thrown all decorum aside. "I slapped that woman across the face repeatedly," she declared, her eyes flashing. "I told her, Lydia is such a good girl. Your son didn't deserve her. If I ever hear you slander my daughter-in-law again, I'll rip your filthy mouth off." Then she pressed several hundred yuan and a written, signed apology into my hand. "This is compensation from that nasty woman for the damage to your reputation." When she saw the police, she sobbed and begged for mercy, said she was momentarily possessed. She took my hands, her grip firm. "Lydia, don't be scared. Marcus may not be here, but your father-in-law and I will protect you. When my parents, who had gotten the news and rushed over, saw this, they were shocked and remorseful for their earlier pessimism. But my mother-in-law simply waved them off with confidence. My own child was being wronged. We know how to handle our own business. I looked at this fierce, wonderful woman who had fought for me, and the last of the shadows from my past life melted away in the warmth of this new family. I was not just safe. I was cherished. The next 5 years passed in a blur of contentment. I gave birth to our daughter, whom we named Lily. She had Marcus's steady brown eyes and a smile that could light up the darkest room. Soon after her birth, Marcus received a promotion and a transfer to a larger base thousands of miles away in Harbor City itself. Neither set of grandparents wanted us to live apart, but they also couldn't bear to be separated from their only granddaughter. They were torn. I wasn't in a rush. While caring for Lily, I found my mind turning back to my interest in medicine. The experiences of my past life had left a deep mark. Even though I still loved creating things with my hands, I could no longer bring myself to hold scissors or needles. They made me feel tense, pulling me back to a place of servitude and quiet desperation. Gradually, a real interest in healing took root. Marcus encouraged me wholeheartedly. "Sweetheart, we're meant to be good with our hands," he said one evening, watching me read a medical text. "If you can't hold an embroidery needle, try a scalpel instead. No matter what you want to do, I've got your back." With his support and our parents' help with Lily, I applied to university and pursued a degree in medicine. It was a challenging, exhilarating journey, a world away from the confined existence I had known. This year, Lily started preschool and quickly formed her own little social circle. Utterly spoiled by 4 adoring grandparents, she had grown used to the northern climate and flatly refused to move. After discussing it with Marcus and getting a very serious 5-year-old's approval from Lily, we decided she would stay with our parents while I headed to Harbor City to reunite with Marcus and begin my residency. Maybe the city was just too small for the paths we were destined to cross. On my very first day reporting to the military hospital, I ran into the 2 people I least wanted to see. I was standing by the roadside, waiting for Marcus's driver, when a sleek foreign sedan pulled to a stop. Leo and Sophia stepped out. It was clear Leo had seized the advantages of his second life. He was thriving, dressed in an expensive, tailored suit, a picture of success. Sophia clung to his arm, her clothes the latest fashion, her smile brittle. When Leo saw me, a flicker of surprise was quickly replaced by smug recognition. He frowned, his posture stiffening. "Lydia," he said, his voice laced with a familiar impatience. "I just mailed you something 3 days ago. So you've been following me after all." He threw a business card at me. It fluttered to the ground between us. "Whatever. I don't want to talk here. Come to this address tonight. I've got something for you to do." Sophia's gaze flickered. She bit her lip, glaring at me with a resentment I knew all too well. Before I could utter a single word of rebuttal, they got back into the car and sped off. A few minutes later, a military jeep screeched to a halt beside me. A young private, flustered and sweating, jumped out. "Dr. Thorne. So sorry, ma'am. Something came up at the unit. Am I late?" I gave him a reassuring smile, my heart rate already returning to normal. "I just got here myself. You're right on time. Let's go." Before getting in the car, I casually stepped on Leo's business card, grinding it under my heel before leaving it in the dust. I didn't take his words to heart at all. Neither he nor Sophia stirred even the slightest ripple in the calm lake of my present. So Marcus and I went to work as usual, completely unbothered. Leo, on the other hand, was not so unbothered. He paced his new, ostentatious office, glancing at his watch in frustration. "It's almost 8. Why isn't Lydia here yet?" Director Gao, a key connection from his past life, would be arriving in a few days. Leo was desperate to make a good impression. He remembered all too well how tough it had been working under him initially. It wasn't until 3 years later, when my tailoring skills had perfectly matched Madame Gao's tastes, that things finally smoothed out. By bringing me in early this time, he was certain he could win Director Gao's favor much sooner. The thought of me made him chuckle, a low, arrogant sound. "She's still the same as before," he thought, "hopelessly devoted to me, which is perfect." He had always planned to let her suffer for a few years, make her eat dirt, and once she was thoroughly humbled, he would take her back. After all, in our past life I had been utterly sincere, earning his family's approval and giving birth to an exceptional son who was just like him. Sophia had given him a son this time too. Though unfortunately the child looked nothing like him. That made Leo miss his past life even more. He wasn't sure whether it was the status he longed for or the son who carried his face. Getting a second shot at life was thrilling, but starting from scratch again sucked. Right now he was just a mid-level officer with a bit of cash, not the powerful figure he used to be. So he wasn't worried. I would be here soon. Once I helped him win over Director Gao, and once he sold a property in the North Bridge suburbs to fund his comeback, he was confident he'd be back on top within a decade. As for the news his mother and sister brought up about me getting married, Leo didn't believe it for a second. That had to be a story my family made up to save face. Nothing more. If there was one thing Leo was sure of, it was this. The Lydia of his past life was the kind of woman who, once she gave her heart, gave it completely. That was exactly why, in this life, even if he kept Sophia as a mistress, he would still marry me. No one made a better wife than I did. A few days later, I was out shopping for household essentials when Sophia cornered me outside a department store. She smiled brightly, a practiced, empty expression. "Dr. Thorne. What a coincidence. Please try this coffee. The beans are imported from Brazil and ground by hand. The flavor is really rich." I was beyond exasperated. What were these two trying to pull? She took a sip of her own coffee, hesitating before looking at me with forced sweetness. "Lydia, I've been waiting here for you for days. Last time you didn't come to the house. I thought maybe you lost the business card. So you really came back here. I didn't think I'd actually run into you." She paused for effect. "My son with Leo is already 4 years old now. You should visit our home sometime." She smiled gently, a masterpiece of false benevolence. What happened before was our fault, mine and Leo's. But love itself isn't wrong. We really hope we can have your blessing. So she was trying to blur the timeline, to make it sound like she got pregnant with Leo's child after their relationship became official in this life. She probably didn't know that just yesterday, Leo had come to me with full confidence, demanding I return to the Grant family. He'd said he couldn't make things hard for Sophia, that she was so kind she'd rather get an abortion than interfere with my happiness. He told me, "Lydia, from now on you'll be the main wife. Sophia will be the second. Her child will call you mom too." He'd even added, "This kind of arrangement is common abroad. What successful man doesn't have multiple wives? I hope you two can live in harmony." I'd always known these two were delusional, but I never imagined just how far that delusion could go. And then, right as Sophia was calmly eating a slice of cake, her son, who had been fidgeting nearby, began breathing fast and shallow, then collapsed onto the ground. My instincts as a doctor kicked in before I could think. I rushed over, kneeling beside him. It was clearly an acute allergic reaction. His airway was swelling. We had to get him to the hospital immediately. As I scrambled to help, checking his pulse and looking for an epinephrine pen in his mother's bag, Sophia, who seconds ago had looked composed and poised, burst into tears and threw herself into the arms of the man rushing through the door. "Leo, save our son," she cried, her voice a theatrical wail. I just wanted to bring him to meet Lydia. Who knew she would deliberately give him mango? I told her over and over again that Kevin is allergic. Leo turned to me with a fury that could burn cities. He stormed toward me, raising his hand to slap my face. But before his palm could land, my training kicked in. I caught his wrist and pressed down hard on a pressure point. His face instantly went pale, drenched in a cold sweat. "What a joke." I snapped, my voice cold as ice. "Did you think we med students were pushovers? Our professors pushed us like we were training to carry bulls on our backs." "Lydia, how could you do this to a child?" he shouted, cradling his numb hand. "You're disgusting. I never realized you were such a vile woman. I should have kept you in line longer." As he continued spewing nonsense, I couldn't take it anymore. "Shut up," I snapped. "Take him to the hospital now." Even as the doctors began treatment in the ear, I hadn't yet left when Sophia, still crying, grabbed my sleeve, demanding an explanation. Moments later, Leo's mother and sister Clara barged in. "Oh, my sweet grandson, my heart is breaking," his mom cried, ignoring me to fuss over the boy. Clara glared at me as if she wanted to rip me apart, while Leo held the weeping Sophia, murmuring words of comfort. Sophia peeked at me through teary eyes, then buried her face deeper into Leo's arms, a smirk of satisfaction barely concealed. He turned, his face cold, and barked, "Lydia, apologize." I had no interest in entertaining this ridiculous circus. I stood up to leave, but Leo grabbed my arm. As we struggled, a voice behind me asked, puzzled, "Dr. Thorne? What's going on?" "We're still waiting on you for the morning briefing." I turned to see several of my interns passing by. Young, one of the new arrivals, was among them. Without hesitation they came over and politely but firmly separated me from the deranged Grant entourage. Behind me, Leo's voice rang out in confusion. "Wait, what did you call her?" "Dr. Thorne." One of the interns replied brightly, "Of course. Dr. Thorne just transferred to our hospital. She's a top graduate from North Medical University. Professor Chongqing's most prized student." The silence that fell behind me was more satisfying than any revenge I could have ever planned. That evening, just after my shift ended, I stepped out of the hospital's main entrance into the cool evening air. I was mentally preparing for a quiet night at home with Marcus, who was due back from a short field exercise. But leaning against a lamppost, his face etched with a strange mix of fury and revelation, was Leo. "Lydia," he said, stepping forward to block my path. His voice was low, deliberate. "You've been reborn too, haven't you?" I wasn't even surprised he'd figured it out. In our past life, a seed of interest in medicine had been planted after a young female doctor treated a climbing injury with such elegant precision. I'd practiced suturing at home, fascinated. Leo had been completely dismissive. "If you can become a doctor," he'd sneered, "then pigs can climb trees." I looked at him now, this man who had once held my entire world in his hands and deliberately let it shatter. A profound sense of disdain washed over me. "Well, I am a doctor now," I said, my voice flat. "I wonder if the pigs in your family have learned to climb trees yet." His face flushed a blotchy red. He immediately snapped, the carefully constructed composure cracking. "You clearly came back to life earlier. Why didn't you come looking for me? You knew I was about to meet Director Gao. You know Director Gao only likes clothes made by you." He took another step, his breath hot with desperation. "You're doing this on purpose. You want to see me suffer, don't you? You want me to beg." He let out a harsh, mocking scoff. "Let me tell you something. I'm doing all this for our future. Don't you want to live that high society life again just like before? Quit your hospital job. Go back to designing clothes. You can help take care of my mom while you're at it. You've been a doctor for a few years now. You should be more experienced with elder care. That works out perfectly." I listened, utterly sickened by the sheer, unadulterated entitlement. In my past life, I knew he was the type to kick you when you were down and burn the bridge after crossing it. But I hadn't realized just how disgustingly, pathologically self-important he could be. He saw my entire existence, my hard-won career, as nothing more than a convenient tool for his own ascent. As the end of the workday approached, familiar colleagues began trickling out in twos and threes. They eyed me and Leo curiously as we stood at the hospital entrance, our postures speaking of a tense confrontation. Leo, misreading their attention as validation of his own importance, stepped forward with a smug, possessive air and reached for my hand. I immediately pulled back as if burned. "Take one more step and I'll call security," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "This is a military hospital. The guards here could take down 3 of you with one hand." I met his gaze, letting all the coldness of 2 lifetimes show in my eyes. "And stop flattering yourself. I'm already married." Leo froze, stunned into momentary silence. That's impossible," he stammered, his confidence faltering. You wouldn't marry anyone but me." A voice, familiar and beloved, cut through the tension like a warm knife through butter. "She did. Married me. Wiggly. Officially. National marriage law recognizes us as lifelong partners." Marcus stepped beside me, his presence a solid, reassuring wall. He didn't even glance at Leo. His eyes were only on me, his gaze softening as he took my hand and interlocked our fingers tightly. "And who are you to question that?" I leaned into his strength, my anger melting away into sheer relief. "I thought you weren't supposed to be back until tomorrow," I whispered. He lowered his head, his voice a husky, intimate rumble meant only for me. "I missed you. Caught the night train back." Behind us, Leo shouted, frustration and ego finally boiling over. He tried to chase after us, but 2 of Marcus's unit guards materialized, blocking his path and holding him firmly back. From a distance I could still hear his hysterical, fading yells. "Lydia, you can only marry me. You're mine. You've always been mine. Marcus held my hand, his grin a private possessive thing as he twined his fingers tighter with mine. A little separation makes reunion sweeter, he whispered, a promise and a threat that sent a delicious shiver down my spine. He had a way of making me feel both fiercely protected and intensely desired, a combination that never failed to undo me. How was it that I, a respectable doctor, always ended up utterly wonderfully ravished by this man? Later, as I lay breathless and sated in our bed, he would just smile lazily, pull the blanket over both of us and say, "Sweetheart, you worry too much. Even your old professor at North Med said you were the toughest student he ever taught, physically and mentally. You'll be fine." A couple of months later, I volunteered for a teaching rotation in a remote county. When I returned to Harbor City, it was already deep autumn, the air crisp and clean. My coworkers immediately pulled me aside, their faces a mixture of amusement and concern. Intern Young became my chief gossip. "Dr. Thorne, you should have seen it. This strange man has been standing outside the hospital every single day, rain or shine, showing up exactly at the start and end of each shift like clockwork." She described it in vivid detail. At first, security thought he was some kind of creep, but then they saw he was just standing there like an idiot, clearly waiting for someone. They stopped bothering him after a while. She leaned in, her eyes wide. "Director Jiang, you should have seen it. He's actually kind of good looking, but this big guy just stood there, sometimes crying. Scared the hell out of us." Young had barely finished her report when, sure enough, the very next day I found Leo waiting for me outside the hospital gates. Seeing the security guards watching him closely, I raised my hand gently to calm them. I needed to end this once and for all. "Lydia, I was wrong." Leo blurted out, panic sharp in his voice. "I was too arrogant. I see that now. Please come back to me." He was crying, the tears messy and real, his composure completely gone. He was rambling desperately. "We were married for years in our last life. We had a son. You're supposed to be with me. We even registered our marriage. You can leave him. I don't care. I'll still marry you." I looked at him, calm and utterly tired. "Leo," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "After you ran out on our wedding, I was relieved. When I woke up in this life, I was terrified that I might have already married you. So the moment you ditched me, I went into town and reclaimed our marriage application." He stood frozen, stunned by the finality of my action all those years ago. "I've been married for years," I continued, the words falling like stones. "I have a daughter. A beautiful, sweet little girl. She doesn't have to tiptoe between her dad and grandma. She's surrounded by people who love her unconditionally." Thinking back to the past, Leo opened his mouth but nothing came out. Finally, with red-rimmed eyes, he muttered, "Lydia, I know I was wrong. I just wanted to let you cool off for a few years. I never intended to let you go. I wrote you a letter every year, but I only just found out that Sophia was hiding them from you. You see, it wasn't my fault." He was pleading now, a broken man clinging to a narrative he'd built for himself. "Just give me another chance. Think about our son. He looks just like me. So smart. So promising. Please, Lydia. I really was wrong." I was beyond fed up with his endless clinging and groveling. But I thought of the promise I had made to Marcus and I held back my disgust. Marcus had once said, his voice deadly serious, that if I couldn't shut this leech of a man down myself, he'd rather take the disciplinary hit and get rid of him his way. For Marcus's sake, for our future, I had to be clear. Brutally clear. So I laid his intentions bare, stripping away every layer of his self-deception. "Leo, the only thing you're unwilling to let go of is the return on investment you think I bring. I could handle your home and advance your career, but now that you've finally gotten your precious Sophia, you've realized she isn't worth all that fantasy you built around her. You've figured out that no one could give you more value as a wife than I did." I took a step closer, my voice dropping, each word a precise, surgical cut. "And as for that son of yours who looks just like you, I'm even more relieved I'm not part of his life. He's just like you. Selfish. Cold. Demanding the whole world bend to him." His face was ashen now, his breath coming in short gasps. "Whether you've learned your lesson or not means nothing to me," I said, delivering the final blow. "In my past life, I did everything a wife, a mother, and a daughter-in-law was supposed to do. But marrying into your family was the most disgusting mistake I ever made. You have no idea how many nights I spent regretting it. Toward the end, even just seeing your face made me sick." I looked him up and down, my lip curling. just like it does now. Leo's legs seemed to give way. He stumbled backward and collapsed to the ground, mumbling in disbelief. How? How could this be? I turned my back on him, the sight of him finally, truly, evoking nothing but pity and revulsion. Don't ever let me see you again for the rest of your life, Leo, I said over my shoulder, my voice final. You really don't want to find out what my husband does to people he sees as threats. And just like that, I walked away, feeling as if a weight I had carried for 2 lifetimes had finally been lifted. I didn't look back. Of course, Marcus got jealous. You hesitated, he pouted that evening, pulling me into his lap on our sofa. You didn't want me to hit him, did you? I rolled my eyes at him, wrapping my arms around his neck. Idiot. He's not even worth 1 strand of your hair. You think I'd risk your career over trash like that? Mollified, he softened instantly, like a lion having its mane brushed the right way. He nuzzled my neck, the incident already forgotten in the simple joy of holding me. Years later, I did end up forming a connection with Director Gao, but not by gifting clothes like before. In our past life, she had suffered from severe asthma. Once, on a business trip, she'd nearly died. In this life, during a routine physical I was conducting for senior staff, I reminded her of a few preventive measures she'd forgotten. She was incredibly touched and thankful. While chatting casually over tea one day, she mentioned something funny. A few years ago, one of my subordinates kept trying to give me these flashy, over-the-top luxury outfits every time we met, regardless of the setting. It was so annoying and mismatched with my style. I couldn't stand it. She took a sip of tea, a wry smile on her face. Eventually, I had him transferred far from headquarters just to get some peace. Later, she heard that same subordinate had gone into business after leaving the military. Harbor City had been one of the first to benefit from reform, so starting a business wasn't unusual, but he had funded his ventures with loan shark money. His projects flopped. No one wanted to back him. He lost everything. Then his mistress left him a letter and disappeared with their son. Madame Gao continued, her tone neutral. In the letter, she confessed the boy wasn't even his, that he was the result of her first love. The real father had come back into their lives and he was the one she truly loved. She thanked him for having once accepted her and her child so generously. And now she hoped he'd understand why she took what little savings they had left. After all, Madame Gao added with a hint of dry irony, the boy had once called him Dad. She concluded the story. When his elderly mother found out the grandson she had loved for years wasn't really blood, she suffered a stroke and died just days later in the hospital. That man, utterly broken, was last seen sitting by the roaring river, clutching a stack of letters, no one knowing what he was thinking. After that, he vanished. No one ever saw him again. I heard the story, a tragic anecdote of a life consumed by ambition and lies, and forgot it almost instantly, like any sad tale you might hear in passing. It held no power over me anymore. The ghost of Leo Grant had finally been laid to rest. My life, my real life, was here. With Marcus, who spent the next several years missing our daughter terribly. Every summer and winter break, he tried to sweet-talk her into visiting and staying longer, engaging in a gentle tug-of-war over affection with both sets of grandparents. I once brought up the idea of having another child. Marcus just pulled me into his arms and smiled, shaking his head. We made a promise, remember? Just one boy or girl. Just one. All our love goes to that child. That's more than enough. He kissed my forehead, his voice soft but firm. Lydia, besides you, I only have room in my heart to love one more person. Any more than that and it wouldn't be whole anymore. And so we lived our life hand in hand all the way to old age. He defended the country. I saved lives. It was a simple, profound partnership, a world away from the gilded cage of my past. When Marcus was 82, surrounded by our children and grandchildren, he lay peacefully in my arms and closed his eyes for the last time. His passing was gentle, a quiet end to a life fiercely and well lived. As I sorted through his belongings, my hands trembling with age and grief, I found it. Tucked inside his favorite book of poetry was our wedding photo. The two of us, young and leaning into each other, looked sweet, a little unfamiliar in our youthful hope. I turned the photograph over. On the back, in his strong, familiar handwriting that nearly bled through the paper, was the inscription that had spanned 2 lifetimes. Lydia, my forever love. Of course. Here is the continuation of the story, bringing it to its conclusion. The years after Marcus's passing were draped in a quiet, profound stillness. The house, once filled with his booming laughter and the energetic chaos of Lily's visits, now held only the gentle echoes of a life well lived. My grief was not a sharp, shattering thing but a deep, settled companion, a testament to the love that had been so vast its absence had its own presence. Lily, our brilliant, fierce daughter, was a university professor by then, a specialist in environmental engineering. She had inherited her father's steadfastness and, much to my secret amusement, a touch of his protective ferocity. She tried to get me to move in with her and her young family, but I refused. This home filled with Marcus was my anchor. I continued my work at the military hospital in a consulting capacity long after official retirement, my hands, which had once wielded needles and then scalpels, now content to hold a pen or offer a steadying touch to a young intern. My life had been a tapestry of service, but this final chapter was one of quiet guidance and deep personal peace. One crisp autumn afternoon, while sorting through a box of old medical journals in the hospital library, I heard a hesitant voice. "Dr. Thorne." I turned. A young woman stood there, perhaps in her late 20s, with intelligent eyes and a familiar, hesitant smile. There was something in the curve of her cheek, the worried line between her brows, that tugged at a memory from another lifetime. "Yes, my dear. I'm Dr. Anya Sharma," she said, stepping forward. I believe you knew my grandmother. Madam Chin." The name landed not with a pang of old pain, but with a warm ripple of nostalgia. "Madam Chin," I repeated, a genuine smile touching my lips. "Of course. She was a formidable woman. How is she?" Anya's smile softened. "She passed 2 years ago peacefully. But she spoke of you often. She called you her most sincere friend. She left something for you. I've been trying to find the right time to give it to you." I was deeply touched. Madam Chin, the bold, cheerful woman from my past life with Leo, who had seen through the glittering facade of my marriage and had offered me the only genuine friendship I had known in that gilded cage. To know that in this life our paths, though different, had still crossed in a way that left a mark on her, was profoundly moving. Anya handed me a small, beautifully carved sandalwood box. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded silk, was not a piece of jewelry or a letter, but a simple, exquisitely crafted silver thimble. And tucked beside it was a black and white photograph. It was of a much younger me from my first life, Elena, sitting at a loom, my face focused and calm, a half-finished tapestry before me. I had no memory of that photo being taken. Leo had never been interested in my craft, only its products. On the back, in Madame Chen's elegant script, was a note. "For the woman with the golden hands and the heart of a lion. A true artist's soul cannot be caged. I saw it then and I see it now in your daughter. This world tried to make you small, but you built a universe of your own. I am honored to have witnessed it in both your lives. Your friend Meiling Chin." Tears, not of sorrow but of a breathtaking, complete understanding, filled my eyes. She had known. Somehow, in her infinite wisdom, Madam Chin had known. She had seen the two threads of my existence and had borne silent witness to my journey from one to the other. This was not a message from the past. It was a blessing from a guardian angel I never knew I had. Anya, seeing my emotion, gently explained. "My grandmother was intuitive. She said you gave her more than beautiful clothes. You gave her a glimpse of unwavering integrity. She always said your marriage to General Thorne was one of the great love stories of our time." I held the thimble, its cool weight a perfect counterbalance to the warmth spreading through my chest. The final, lingering ghost of my life as Elena, the ghost of being misunderstood and used, finally dissolved into nothingness. I had been seen. Truly seen. That evening, Lily came to visit, bringing my boisterous grandson Kai. As Kai played on the rug with a set of wooden blocks, Lily noticed the sandalwood box on the table. "What's this, Mom?" "It's beautiful." I handed her the thimble and the photograph. "A gift from an old friend," I said softly. Lily studied the photo, her brow furrowed. This looks like you. But it's so old. And the style of the clothes." She looked up at me, her eyes wide with confusion. "Who is this?" I took a deep breath. The story, which I had carried alone for so long, suddenly felt too heavy, too precious to keep to myself any longer. My daughter, a woman of science and logic, deserved to understand the strange, wonderful tapestry from which her own life was woven. "Lily," I began, my voice quiet. What if I told you that the life we live is not always our first? That sometimes, we are given a second chance to get it right. She listened, her scientist's skepticism slowly giving way to a daughter's empathy as I unspooled the tale. I told her of my life as Elena, the perfect wife, to a man who despised me. I spoke of Leo's ambition, Sophia's deception, the sale of the courtyard house, the profound loneliness of a marriage that was a beautiful empty shell. I told her of the humiliation on the wedding day that was my salvation. And then I told her of Marcus. Not just the father she knew, but the silent, steadfast soldier from that other life. The man who had loved me from a distance, who had sent anonymous gifts for a decade, and who had died with my name next to his on a cold headstone. The man in that photograph, I said, pointing to the young woman at the loom, was living a life that wasn't truly hers. The woman I am now, this is who I was always meant to be. Your father, he was my right path. He was my second chance, and I took it with both hands. Lily was silent for a long time, staring at the thimble in her palm. Then she looked at me, her eyes shining with tears. The packages, she whispered. When I was little, Dad would sometimes get this faraway look and say he was making up for lost time. I never understood what he meant. She came and sat beside me, taking my hands, the hands that had sewn, that had healed, that had held her father as he left this world. He knew, didn't he? In his heart, he knew he had almost lost you. I think he did, I said, my voice thick with emotion. And he made sure he never would. Kai, tired of his blocks, toddled over and climbed into my lap, his small warm body a perfect weight of pure love and future. Lily wrapped her arms around both of us, and we sat there in the gathering dusk, 3 generations bound by a love that had, against all odds, conquered time itself. The story was out. It was no longer a secret burden, but a part of our family's history, a testament to resilience and the transformative power of a love that is chosen every single day. Sharing my story with Lily changed something fundamental between us. It was as if she now saw the full landscape of my soul, with all its weathered mountains and deep, peaceful valleys. She began asking questions, not with the morbid curiosity of someone hearing a fantastical tale, but with the deep interest of an historian piecing together her own origin. The courtyard house, she said one day over tea. The one you saved. The one I grew up visiting with the grandparents. That was the one you sold in the other life. It was, I confirmed. Selling it felt like selling a piece of my own soul. It funded another woman's freedom and a man's ambition, but it cost me my anchor. In this life it became our home. It became the place where your father and I built our life. It's where you took your first steps. She looked around the familiar room, seeing it with new eyes. It was no longer just her childhood home. It was a monument to a different choice, a reclaimed future. Lily, in her pragmatic way, integrated this new understanding into the fabric of her own life. I saw it in the way she looked at her husband with a fierce, protective gratitude. I saw it in the way she raised Kai, teaching him not just to be successful but to be kind, to be present, to value the people in his life above all else. The ghost of Leo's legacy, of coldness and entitlement, would not touch my bloodline. A few years later, Lily was involved in a large urban renewal project in the oldest part of Harbor City. She came to me one evening, her face alight with a mix of excitement and solemnity. "Mom, you'll never believe what we found. One of the properties the city acquired for the project was a derelict factory. When we were doing the historical assessment, we found the original land deeds. It was built on the grounds of an old, demolished courtyard house." She laid a folder on the table in front of me. Inside were photocopies of faded documents and a modern photograph of a weed-choked concrete lot. But I didn't need the picture. I knew. The address was seared into my memory. It was the location of the Grant family's original home in the city. The base from which Leo had tried to launch his empire in this life. "The records are a mess," Lily continued, her voice carefully neutral. "The owner took out massive loans against it, defaulted, and it was seized by creditors years ago. The business he started there, a textile import-export company, went bankrupt. There were rumors about embezzlement, about a mistress who disappeared with company funds. The man himself just vanished. No forwarding address. No death certificate. Nothing." She was watching me, looking for a reaction. I felt nothing but a distant, quiet pity. Leo had his second chance. He had the same advantages of foresight that I had. But he had used them to chase the same hollow prizes, to repeat the same patterns of blame and entitlement. He had sought to rebuild his gilded cage while I had chosen to plant a garden. His path had led him back to the same emptiness, perhaps even a greater one. Some people, I said, closing the folder and pushing it gently back toward her, are given a new canvas and fresh paint, but they only know how to paint the same old dark picture. They are prisoners of their own nature. Lily nodded, understanding. The project will be a community center with a public garden. We're naming it after General Gao's wife, a patron of the arts. It seems fitting. It was more than fitting. It was poetry. The site of so much calculated ambition and personal tragedy would become a place of community, growth, and beauty. It was the perfect final footnote to that chapter of my existence. As my own energy began to wane, my world gradually grew smaller. It shrank from the bustling hospital to the quiet of my home, then to my garden, and finally to my favorite armchair by the window, where I could feel the sun on my face and watch the seasons turn. My family was my constant. Lily, her husband, and a teenage Kai, who was now taller than all of us and possessed his grandfather's steady gaze. They filled the house with their love, their arguments, their plans for the future. They were the living, breathing proof that I had chosen correctly. The love I had built with Marcus was not a fleeting thing. It was a foundation that had nurtured this wonderful, resilient family. One afternoon, as I dozed in my chair, I felt a presence rather than heard a sound. I opened my eyes. The room was bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. And for a moment, just a moment, I saw him. Marcus. He was not the old man I had held as he passed, nor the elderly general of his later years. He was the young soldier from my wedding day, standing stiffly in his uniform, his cap in his hands, his whole being radiating a hopeful, nervous energy. He was looking at me with those deep, steady eyes, and he was smiling that same unguarded, joyous grin that had lit up the room when I had agreed to be his wife. There was no fear in me, only a soaring, boundless joy. The thread that connected us, which I had felt every day of my life since our second chance began, was now pulling taut, not with sadness but with welcome. I heard his voice, not with my ears, but with my soul, as clear as it had been on that long-ago day. Okay. The single word was laden with a lifetime of promises kept. I smiled, closed my eyes, and let the warmth carry me home. Lily found me later that evening, peaceful in my chair, a soft smile on my lips. There was no struggle, only a profound quiet. Grief washed over her, but it was tempered by the knowledge of the story, the incredible full-circle journey of my life. She knew with a certainty that defied logic that I was not gone. I had simply gone to keep a long-standing appointment. At the memorial service, the hospital was overflowing. Colleagues, former patients, soldiers who had served with Marcus, and friends whose lives I had touched. It was a celebration of a life of service and love. After the service, as family gathered back at the house, Lily brought out the sandalwood box. She showed Kai the thimble and the photograph, and she told him the story. The story of his grandmother who had lived 2 lives. The story of a love that was so strong, it defied death itself to find its way. Kai, a young man on the cusp of his own future, listened intently. He looked at the photograph of the young woman at the loom, and then at the recent pictures of me, white-haired and smiling, surrounded by my family. So, he said, his voice thoughtful. Grandma's first life was about what she could do for others, and her second life was about who she could become for herself. Lily looked at her son, her heart swelling with pride. Yes. And in becoming who she was meant to be, she gave us everything. Weeks later, as Lily was going through my personal effects, she found a journal tucked away in my bedside table. It wasn't a detailed diary, but a collection of thoughts, sketches of medical diagrams, pressed flowers from Marcus's letters, and Lily's childhood drawings. On the last page, written in my firm, clear script from a few years prior, was a final entry. I have been thinking of tapestries lately. In my first life, I wove one for others with threads of duty, obligation, and a love that was never reciprocated. It was technically perfect, but its pattern was not my own. In this life, I thought I had left the loom behind. I was wrong. I simply chose different threads. Threads of healing, of passion, of a love that was given freely and returned 1,000-fold. With Marcus, with Lily, with the family we built, I wove a new tapestry. This one is vibrant, a little wild in places, flawed and beautiful. Its pattern is uniquely, joyously mine. If my story teaches anything, let it be this. You are never trapped by the pattern you are given. You can always choose your own threads. You can always start again. And if you are very lucky, you will find a fellow weaver who will stand by your side, and together, you will create a masterpiece. Lily read the words through her tears, and she knew. The story was not just a family secret. It was a legacy. A legacy of resilience, of choice, of the courage to walk away from a beautiful prison and build a simple, sturdy home filled with love. She placed the journal back in the sandalwood box, next to the silver thimble and the faded photograph. She would keep it safe. One day when Kai was older, or when he had children of his own, she would pass it on. The story of Lydia and Elena and Marcus would continue. Not as a ghost from the past, but as a guiding star for the future. A timeless reminder that it is never too late to find your right path and to walk it hand in hand with your forever love. The end.